Laura Ranieri Roy at the Rom's Egyptian collection in Toronto. In front of me is the most important object of Egyptian history. It's not real. It's a replica here, but nevertheless, it's a good replica, and it tells you a lot about Egyptian history. It's called the Narmer Palette, and it commemorates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt into one nation. And I'm going to tell you what's going on here. We have in the center of the palette this big fellow striding forward with a mace in his hand, about to smite this other poor fellow on the ground. Who are these people? This is the king of Upper Egypt. We know this because he's wearing his white hat, which looks a bit like a bowling pin. And on the ground, it's the king of Lower Egypt, which means he was the northern king. And he's being smited by the southern king. And he doesn't have a crown, but we know he's the king of Lower Egypt because look at those papyrus plants above him. The land of the marshes, that's the delta, that's Lower Egypt. So this smiting scene, this dates back to 3000 BC, it goes back even further. It would continue as an iconic pose of a king for thousands of years, from millennia forward, that famous image of kings smiting. It's central to ancient Egypt iconography. Now, what else do we see here? We see the king of Upper Egypt's little sandal bearer. We see above this king of Lower Egypt, this Horus. Horus is the god of the living king, and he is really doing a job on his enemies to the north. He seems to have a hook up his nose. So the conquering of the lands of the north are happening. Look at this little square in the center. This is the precursor of the cartouche. It gives us the name of this king, and his name is Nar-Mer, and the images are catfish chisel, and it means fighting catfish. That's the name of the king that ultimately unified Egypt in 3000 BCE. And we have these Mesopotamian goddesses Bat, these cow goddesses, many other things. The other side has more iconography, but it's all about the unification of Egypt. The Narmer Palette, the Royal Ontario Museum. And I'm in the lobby, I'm in the Corelli Court, and I'm standing in front of the coffin of Nakht. In one of our episodes, we're going to show his mummy, which is upstairs on the 3rd floor of the museum in Toronto. But I wanted to show you this object. You may recognize this beautiful alabaster vessel with the head of a dog or jackal as a canopic jar. This was one of 4 jars that held the organs of the deceased. Very, very important in the mummification process that 4 organs were preserved. They were the lungs, the liver, the intestines, and the stomach. And the stomach specifically was held by this jackal god, one of the demigods of Horus, called Duamutef. And here is a beautiful alabaster piece. We don't know exactly where it was found, but it would certainly have held someone's desiccated stomach. This was very important because in order to ascend to the afterlife, the stomach, lungs, liver, intestine, and body would have to be united with the spirit to ascend into an effective spirit, an Akh. This is one of my favorite displays. These are Middle Kingdom tomb models. They are very specific to this era of history between 2000 and 1800 BCE. And what we have are these beautiful little models of everything from granaries and breweries, animals, livestock, tools that were placed inside the tomb to equip and provision the deceased for the afterlife. They believed in magic in ancient Egypt. They believed that in putting a granary, this is a granary we're looking at right here, they're making grain for bread. In giving the deceased this little model factory, it would come to life. It would come to life and produce grain for him forevermore. Moving along, we see these agricultural instruments. We see a seed bag that would be important for spreading the grain in the fields to grow the crops. And we see wonderful images of donkeys that are bringing the seed perhaps to the granary, helping with this whole agricultural system. So in having these donkeys in the tomb, again, further provisioning the deceased to have everything they would need for the afterlife. Finally, we have this jewel of the whole collection. It's this beautiful cow model. It's a cow giving birth. And you can even see that there's two fellows on either end of the calf, one helping the calf, who is coming out of his mother, and the other giving eye contact to the pregnant mother. It's a wonderful scene showing his Egyptian husbandry at its best. Charles Corelli purchased these wonderful objects when he was in Egypt in the early 1900s. He had a great eye and a love for these models and wanted to make sure his museum had these to give us a window into life in Middle Egypt, in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt between 2000 and 1800 BCE. Middle Kingdom, 2 models, a total highlight of the Egyptian collection at the ROM. The pyramids of Egypt, they continue to amaze us, to confound us, to delight us. And here I am at the Royal Ontario Museum, and they have an amazing model of the very first pyramid. And it's not the ones you know at Giza. This is a model of the Step Pyramid, which is maybe about 30 miles from Giza, if you travel to Cairo. Unusual, amazing monument. But it's so much more than a pyramid. First of all, look at this model. It's a huge courtyard with this niched wall that expanded for, miles and miles around. It housed a small town inside it. This is the entire funerary complex of King Djoser, who ruled in and around 2650 BCE. He had the first architect where we know his name. His name was Imhotep. And before Djoser, kings were buried under one-step mastabas. And Djoser and his architect Imhotep had an idea. Why not place many mastabas, steps, on top of one another to create more visibility for the king, so that people across the nation, maybe living many kilometers away, could see a symbol of the king rising up. So they placed at first 4 steps, and then they added another 2 to create this amazing step structure as a symbol of the king and also his stairway to heaven. This monument was thought would be a way for Djoser to ascend to the sky and be one with the immovable stars. But here's another thing. They also believed in the god Osiris, who resided under the earth. So Djoser himself was buried deep in a shaft, way underneath the ground in the center of this pyramid, deep in a shaft, so he could merge with the god Osiris, but then also climb the stairway to heaven and be with the stars. Beautiful. But there were many different structures. For instance, over here is where he would run his Hebsed festival. And this was a celebration, just like we have the Queen's Jubilee, a celebration of his rule, but also an important ritual where he would prove his fitness to continue on ruling. They did this, kings, every 30 years during their reign. But here, Imhotep has built a structure in stone. It was imperishable, so that his spirit would be running it in perpetuity for the afterlife, not just as a living king, but as a dead king. This monument is famous for 3 things. It's the first monument in the world that was created entirely in stone. Second, it basically preserves in imperishable stone many of the images of the living world. There are tree trunks used as roofs. There are different foliage, different palm leaves. So again, replicating the natural world in stone. Many, many amazing things to discover. This massive structure with its dummy buildings, its many temples, its Hebsed court, and of course, the burial of Djoser deep under the earth. The Step Pyramid model at the Royal Ontario Museum.